So the Tennessee Titans will be playing the Baltimore Ravens wild card weekend, or I guess super wild card weekend. That's weird branding. But I already made a video breaking down how Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense will do against the Titans defense. You can check that one out. Or you can just watch this one and hear how I think the flip side will go. How will the Titans offense fare against the Ravens defense? So let's just get right into it. And the first thing everyone probably wants to talk about is Derrick Henry. And Baltimore actually did a pretty good job of shutting down Henry early on in the game. One thing they did was something like this, where what you're going to see is that I'm going to circle a cornerback right here. Why am I circling a cornerback? This is going to be Marlon Humphrey right here, and really watch what happens. Tannehill takes the snap, and Humphrey immediately goes in and makes a quick tackle on Henry. So he read that play, and he helped in the running game. And that's something that Baltimore is okay with doing. They have corners who have no problem tackling. Even Marcus Peters, who that was kind of a sort of a slight against him, was that he didn't tackle in Kansas City or in Los Angeles. Well, he tackles in Baltimore. So the way a lot of it would go would be something like this. This is how a lot of these running plays would end up working out for Tennessee and for Baltimore, and how Baltimore would be able to stop them. Henry's going to run to the right, and the way this works for Tennessee is that there's kind of a numbers disadvantage if you take a look, because you see there is a double team with a tight end and an offensive lineman. One of them can get off the double team and block one of the linebackers for Baltimore, but the other Baltimore linebacker can run in and make a play. Now, this isn't the end of the world for Tennessee, because someone can still make all their blocks, and there only needs to be one window. You don't need to, for an offense, you don't need to clear up multiple running lanes. You just need to clear up one, and Henry's vision is as good as any back's vision in the league. I think it's probably the best in the league, so you're fine there. But the issue is the defensive line does not get moved too much at all, and both linebackers clear up the gap, so there just isn't a running lane either way. So that's kind of how Baltimore was able to get some stops early on. If Derrick Henry gets a couple yards on a run, you'll take that 10 out of 10 times. You'll let him get 2-yard runs, even 3-yard runs all day long. This play is kind of a better example of exactly what I'm talking about. You see that there's actually going to be a couple wide receivers who are going to be making blocks on this play. The key one being A.J. Brown. He's the one wide receiver who I have a block on the screen. He's the one in the middle. They also have a tight end and tackle. And those are the 3 blocks here. Those are the key blocks, as that's the gap that Henry is going to try and run through. But once this play starts, watch how they absorb this contact, and there isn't really a window for Henry to run through. He can try and squeeze through one of those gaps, but he's not going to gain a ton of yards this way. There aren't these wide open gaps that we've seen in the past, and there aren't those wide open gaps that we saw when Baltimore played Tennessee last time in the playoffs. I should mention I'm taking all of these plays from the game they played earlier in the season. This was actually a low moment for Baltimore in this game. This was kind of, the beginning of all of those, questions that the media had for the Ravens, and they've definitely answered them since then. But yeah, so that's what I'm taking it from. They're different teams, but they're still largely similar. Henry, again, lowers the shoulder and tries to run through, but there just isn't that many yards there. And again, it's maybe not a perfect stop. You're not getting Henry to lose 4 yards, but those are just the types of plays you will absolutely take. However, on a play like this, you're going to see a massive adjustment get made. What is this massive adjustment? Well, take a look. See if you notice anything before I draw anything on the screen. One of the key differences is something I still don't have drawn on the screen. You see, that's the blocking concept, but there's one exception. You notice there's a linebacker over the middle of the field who's unblocked. There's also a fullback in the game for Tennessee. And once they started having a fullback, things just ran smoother. I'm going to expect that Tennessee is going to have a fullback in the game through a large part of it. And also, it needs to be mentioned that the defense got tired as the game goes on. And when defenses get tired, Derrick Henry can really feast. That's why he typically plays his best football in the fourth quarter. Because, Derrick Henry was apparently built in a lab to play football, and I don't think I've ever seen him get tired. So, as the game goes on, it's only advantage Tennessee. As you see here, the linebacker kind of tried to go to a different gap, I think because of the fullback, which allowed for a wide open hole, and Henry in open space was able to pick up many more yards. That's not even necessarily the best example of it, but, they were able to get much bigger windows as the game was going on, much bigger running lanes as the game was going on. And that's part of why you saw this comeback. Because remember, Baltimore was up relatively big in this one, but then Tennessee was able to come roaring back. This one's going to be another good example where, again, the blocking concept to the left, you see now there's a fullback who's going to run over and he's going to block a linebacker, a cornerback, whereas in the past that wasn't the case. And now everyone's getting accounted for. And in the past, what was happening is that everyone was accounted for, but there wasn't really running lanes because Baltimore players were doing a good job of not getting moved. But it's more difficult when you now have a matchup nightmare with a cornerback trying to take on a block from a fullback. That's just advantage offense. Tannehill takes the snap, gives the ball to Henry, and again, look at that running lane. It's nothing huge, but it's way bigger than Tennessee had going earlier in the game, and Derrick Henry can absolutely work with that. He's so fast, he's so hard to bring down with an arm tackle. You can't just get a little bit of contact to bring him down, you need a lot, and there just isn't enough room for Baltimore players to reach over and be able to make this tackle. Henry squeezes through, he's able to pick up that first down, and I fully suspect Tennessee will use fullbacks far more than they used them in the first half, especially of last time they played. I think the fullback added an interesting element, and it'll be interesting to see what Baltimore does to counteract that. I'm not sure if there really is a way to counteract that too much. The disadvantage, of course, is that you're taking a player out in the passing game, but it's really not that big of a deal, I think. I think it's a huge advantage for Tennessee. So now let's talk some about the passing game. And Baltimore had an incredible design on a play. They knew Tennessee was probably going to be passing the ball, and that's kind of one of the things I talked about a lot in the first video I made about these two teams is in obvious passing situations, that's not what either of these teams want. These teams both like situations where they could pass it or could run it. They use deception really well. Both of them do. This is a 3rd down and 4, so there's they could run it, but probably this is going to be a passing play. And especially when Derrick Henry isn't on the field, this is going to be a passing play. Baltimore knows it. So this is what they're doing. They're playing man coverage, and they're faking as though it's going to be like a cover 1 blitz, but it isn't. So what they're instead going to do is to have 2 players, 2 edge rushers, fake as though they're rushing the passer, and then dropping back into coverage. So it's actually only going to be a 3-man rush right here. But there is an exception, and that exception is a linebacker who is currently in charge of covering a back. But if the halfback decides to block, then he rushes the passer as well, which would create a 4-man rush. The route you see on the screen is a horrible route against this type of coverage, but it's a great route against the coverage that Baltimore is faking as though they're in a cover 1 blitz, because the 2 players who are going to be playing in zone in the middle of the field would not be playing there in a cover 1 blitz. And so they're basically just trying to bait Tannehill into making a dumb decision. So Tannehill takes the snap. 3 things to look at. 1, the linebacker who was in charge of covering the back noticed he was blocking, created pressure immediately. Tannehill has to throw the ball quickly. Then in the yellow circle, there's a bit of separation, but not a ton. Tannehill is going to have to lead his receiver to make this throw, and it's going to be a difficult throw. And the third thing, of course, is when a linebacker for Baltimore drops back into coverage, he's just right in front of the throwing lane, but Tannehill didn't pick this up. Really clever play design, especially because, it's not anything you won't see, but it's a really good play call because of really the situation. Baltimore likes to run cover 1 blitzes, so to run this kind of disguise, it did a good job in fooling Tannehill. Tannehill throws it right into a Baltimore Ravens hands, and they're able to pick up an interception, and they get a big return on it, which directly led to points for Baltimore. And I think a lot of people might wonder, okay, Jackson, what's the significance of that? Why did you bring that up? And I brought it up because I think that this is something Baltimore could do. This is something Baltimore likes to do. They get very creative on defense, and I wouldn't be shocked to see them fool Tannehill in a similar way the next time they play. That is an option. Baltimore had a clear mindset of let's try to get them in as many obvious passing situations as possible, and I think that's a smart mindset. The issue is they didn't do a very good job of defending those. They really didn't. In fact, they did a pretty poor job of it. But luckily for them, the Tennessee Titans offense did equally as poor of a job trying to attack that. Like on this one, it's going to be a cover 1 man play. So for Tennessee, they have a receiver running a route that is good against this type of coverage, so that's where Tannehill is going to throw the football. Tannehill takes the snap, and he is going to throw it in that direction. There was a bit of pressure, and the throw was just too high to be complete. There was a lot of that, and one of the things I really talked about in my first video about these two teams was how many times Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense had yards there that they just weren't able to convert. There was honestly much more for Tennessee. Both teams left a lot of yards and points on the board. Tennessee left more on the board, even though they won. This one's another one where it's a staple of the Titans offense. They run play action. They have a receiver run over the middle and another receiver runs deep. So the way it works is the deep receiver pushes the safety further deep. The play action is going to push the Ravens players who are in charge of covering the middle of the field further in, and you have a throwing lane to hit a receiver. That's the way it works, and Tennessee does this better than anybody. But Tannehill's going to run this play action. He's going to wait for his receiver to get open, and then when he finally makes this throw, it's just a bit behind, and maybe could have been caught if they were on the same page. Corey Davis was not able to make the grab, and that's something that I don't expect them to miss if they have that opening, when they play each other in the playoffs. I just think that they're going to be okay in those situations, and they're not going to miss as many as they did miss in Baltimore. This one's another interesting example, where this one I'm going to bring up because it's not exactly what I've shown the last plays. It wasn't necessarily a bad play from Tennessee, more so just a play they weren't able to convert that they sometimes convert. It's cover 2 zone. They have a receiver who's going to get into a gap in coverage. This is the play that can work out, and that's what they're going to do. Also worth mentioning, part of why you see a good amount of zone in these plays, despite the fact that Baltimore prefers to play man, is because Tennessee's so good at running the football. If you have 5 guys who are going to potentially be turning their backs to cover a receiver, now you only have 6 guys, one of them probably going to beat a deep safety to try and tackle Henry. That's just going to be really difficult. Well, I guess 7 guys, because there's a player who's in charge of covering the halfback, Derrick Henry, and, there's probably going to be tight ends or fullbacks blocking. So, my math's off. Not a math guy, but that's besides the point. Tannehill runs the play action. This time, Baltimore doesn't bite too much, but you see that there is maybe a gap where Tannehill can make this throw, and you see why I'm saying this is the play that can work, but it's not clear, because the throwing window doesn't exactly match up where the receiver Tannehill wants to hit is, and that's kind of the issue. You have to throw it in between the 2 Baltimore players because, that's the main thing here in zone coverage, is you throw to where the coverage isn't, not necessarily to where your receiver is, so it's just a bit off here. Tannehill fires it anyways. It needed to be further away and could have been intercepted, ends up getting incomplete. Tannehill's the kind of guy where he'll take chances, and he makes a lot of these chances, so it's worth it. But for Baltimore, they honestly might need to come up with a turnover or 2 to win this football game on defense, because this Titans offense is just so loaded and so good. There was also this play, which was just weird, where you're going to see Derrick Henry is lined up as a quarterback, and the snap is going to go way over his head. So that's just one of those weird plays, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. These plays aren't going to happen consistently, and some of them are going to happen. You're not going to play a perfect game, but it just seemed like Tennessee beat themselves a lot more than they typically beat themselves over the course of a football game. So did Baltimore, but I think Tennessee did it more, so I think Tennessee left more points on the board. One thing worth mentioning, like on a play like this, Tennessee can go out and they can purposely come up with a way to try and beat your defense by knowing what you're running. Because if they know you're probably going to play zone, they can run plays designed to beat zone. This play designed to beat zone. 2 receivers run deep. Another one's going to chip an edge rusher, and then he's going to run out. Tannehill just simply hits him in the flat, and you try and pick up as many yards as you can because the 2 deep receivers are going to push the Baltimore defensive players further deep. Watch, Tannehill takes the snap, he is going to flip it out, and this play is easily able to work. They get a big gain on that one. Largely because they had a good feeling. They knew that zone coverage of some kind was coming for Baltimore, and for Baltimore, you just got to be more prepared for stuff like that. This wasn't a traditional zone coverage. It was a zone blitz, and they even, moved some guys around, so that probably factored in as well, but just little things like that is something Tennessee can do to attack Baltimore. One thing I thought the Ravens did actually a pretty good job of is beating that concept I talked about earlier that Tennessee does better than anybody, where it's zone coverage that Baltimore is in because they force you in zone because of their running game, and then they can run play action and beat you over the top. And I thought Baltimore did about as good of a job as you can just, defending these routes, the ones over the middle against play action. Tannehill takes the snap. The linebackers certainly were aware of a potential running play, but now look how they get back. They're both doing a really good job, as best job as they could have, of getting back and taking away that route. Now, Tannehill wasn't even looking there on this play, so it's a moot point, but I thought that they did a good job on that, and that's something that you can at least feel like, hey, you have that going for you, and who knows, maybe Tennessee will try to do it a bit more sparingly because they know they had a bit of a rough time getting those plays to work, and they'll try different kind of ways to get guys open on play action, and it's just helping you to get them away from their bread and butter. The issue is Tennessee can absolutely find a million ways to beat you through play action, and while I thought Baltimore did a good job, they did not do a perfect job of not letting that happen. This play is a good one where it's going to be play action, but this time to have a receiver who's going to run a route that's going to be towards the outside, towards the sideline, which isn't typically what they do. But remember what I talked about earlier. Very early on, I talked about how sometimes Baltimore's corners will get involved in the running game, and that can help you in the running game. The issue is you cannot get beat in the passing game. Tannehill takes the snap. It is going to be a quick play action, and look at how Marcus Peters stepped in a little bit. He is aware of a potential run, and I don't think he would be this far in if it was, a different team that didn't have as good of a running attack. And because of this, now Corey Davis has the speed to get by him. As you see, that's what happens. Peters gets completely burned. Looked like he tried to hold him to just accept a 5-yard penalty, but couldn't even do that. And instead, they get the ball all the way inside the 10-yard line. I actually think that that's a good strategy. Don't be afraid to hold guys. Like, honestly, if you get beat, just tackle him, take the 5-yard penalty. It's better than giving up 50 yards. Honestly, I know that sounds kind of a bit weird, but I think that's what they should probably do if they find themselves in that position, because you're probably going to. Tennessee gets you out of position better than, I think they do it better than anyone in the league. I really do. And that's including Baltimore, who's also incredible at it. And of course, there were also just those obvious passing situations where they knew Tannehill was going to throw the football and he was just able to beat them. Like on this one, what's going to happen is that this is going to be man coverage for Baltimore. It's going to be a cover 1 blitz, and Tennessee has a receiver running over the middle. This is a good route against this type of coverage. As you remember earlier, this is the route that Tannehill wanted to throw to earlier that resulted in the interception, but this time it is the concept that he thinks he's going up against that actually is the case, so that's a good situation for Tennessee. Tannehill's going to take the snap once again. He's able to fire this once again. They get a first down. Just little stuff like that. They make things easy for themselves, and it works out very well. Whereas for Baltimore, it almost, they've got the work cut out for them for sure. One potential X factor is going to be Yannick Ngakoue, who, he's moved around a bit, been on 3 different teams in the past calendar year. But I think that what's interesting is that he did have a good game against Tennessee. I could see him having another good game. We don't know if he's going to even play in the game, so that's obviously a factor. But if he does, he could be a difference maker. On this one, he's going up against Ty Sombrello, who I believe, I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he hasn't been playing these past few weeks. They're now having David Quinsonberry. Taylor Lewan is their typical left tackle. He's injured, so that's what they're going with. And I do think it's worth mentioning that could be a way to beat them. Because watch, Ngakoue is going to do his speed rush that he's so good at, knocks the ball out. That was actually ruled a fumble, even though it went very far forward. And that's what he can do. That's what Ngakoue is capable of. And so he could be an X factor. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. I do think that Baltimore, their road to victory is to get a couple turnovers. I think that that's actually going to be key. And I think that they can do it. I think Baltimore is the team that is probably more likely to get turnovers in this game than Tennessee. I think that they have a defense that can be capable of doing that. But I just don't know. I feel like Tennessee is just a matchup nightmare for Baltimore. I think that on both sides of the ball, it's the exact opposite of what you'd want. And I think that Baltimore is probably the better team. I think that Tennessee matches up well against Baltimore. And so in my first video, I said that there was only going to be 9 possessions. I think it'll be a low possession game. And I said that Baltimore is still going to score 31 points. I think that Tennessee scores 34 points. I have Tennessee winning this football game in a tight affair that I could absolutely see going either way. I just think it's a matchup problem, and I think Tennessee's really good. Tennessee's offense is a matchup problem against everybody, quite frankly, and their defense isn't great, but I think they'll be able to do more than the Ravens will be able to do against the Titans offense, which is just red hot right now. It's just as hot as the Baltimore Ravens offense, and it's a matchup nightmare. So, yeah, that's what I think. What do you guys think? Am I wrong? Am I right? Let me know in the comments below. It should be an incredible game. It should be a high-flying game. Really look forward to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.